Greetings. I'm glad for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. But before I do so, I'd like to say something personal. As many of you are aware, in July, I was diagnosed with a serious medical condition, which has involved a long stay in hospital, wearing a constricting back brace and receiving chemotherapy. The good news is that I'm not wearing the back brace anymore, and I'm responding very well to the treatment. In the new year, I undergo further treatment, but the hope and expectation is that this will result in a long remission. So what I want to say is a very big thank you to you for all the expressions of love and concern and your prayers, which have made an enormous difference to me and the family during a challenging time. We're very grateful. Christmas this year is unlikely to be like any other Christmas we've previously experienced. However, the pressure isn't likely to go away. It will be just different. Maggie Dawn, the principal of St Mary's College, Durham University, writes in her book for Advent, Beginnings and Endings, Christmas can sometimes feel less like a feast to be celebrated and more like a deadline to be reached. And I guess we all know what she means. Increasingly, the celebration starts earlier so that when eventually we arrive at Christmas, instead of marking the beginning of the festival, it's the climax of one that's been going on for ages. And the festival that should start on Christmas Day and continue for 12 days is virtually over by Boxing Day. Now, this, of course, happens outside the church, but also from within. I want to suggest to you that Advent gives us an opportunity to stop and to take stock, and maybe this year more than others. It marks the beginning of a new church year, and as long as we approach it as a season in its own right, rather than Christmas come early, it has its own character. It has a number of aspects, but the one that I want to reflect upon is waiting. And I guess it's no surprise that in the sort of world in which we live, especially now, we're not great at this. Now, it's at this point that I find music instructive, and I need you to indulge me. Music, or certainly most Western music, works on the principle of ETR. That is, equilibrium, tension, and resolution. Stay with me, okay? Music starts from a place of equilibrium, from which tension is created, and then the tension is resolved. And how composers handle the resolution of tension is what music is all about. So let's take a great piece of music, such as Humpty Dumpty Sat on the Wall. I'm going to sing it to you, and I'm just going to point out how things proceed. So we have Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. At the end of the first line, you're still more or less at home. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. By the end of the second line, you're at a point of tension and you're definitely away from home. All the king's horses and all the king's men. At the end of this line, the tension is intensified further. Couldn't put Humpty together again. And at the end of the next line comes the resolution. Equilibrium, tension, and resolution. Now, I could provide countless other examples that you might want to go and listen to, such as Beethoven's Fiorelisa, or the theme from Schindler's List, the slow movement of Brahms' Second Symphony. If you've got 5 hours to spare, there's Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde. But let me give you another example, which is a song we're very familiar with in our worship, Be Still for the Presence of the Lord. Just track this one through as we go. La 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 la. Even at that point, we're not home. La 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 la. So the tension is very definitely there. La 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 la. Even more so. La 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 la. Even more so. La 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 La, 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 la. Now, I would suggest that that worship song works so well. It's a good melody, it's got good harmony, but it is the way that the tension is managed and ultimately resolved. Great music contains tensions within tensions, and how the tension is held and partly resolved, and resolved only to open up another tension, and then resolved completely, bringing closure, is the stuff of music, all music. And I could have illustrated with many forms of music. You might not be aware of this when you listen to music, and there's no reason why you should, but this is what's going on. Great composers and songwriters use tension to generate expectations which are deliberately delayed through the diversions and digressions that the music takes. And that not yet of resolution through delayed gratification is reckoned to be one of the essential skills to be learned by any composer. And regardless of the music style, be it pop, soul, rock, electronic, country, classical, popular song, or jazz in particular, where music is composed in the instant, a huge amount depends upon learning to manage the space between the tensions and the delayed resolutions in ways that keep and sustain our interest. So ETR, equilibrium, tension, and resolution. If we're in a situation of waiting, by its very nature, it isn't a place of either equilibrium or resolution. If it was, it wouldn't be waiting. We might be relatively unanxious about some kinds of waiting, but we're still not in a place of equilibrium or resolution. We're in some state of tension. And at least on occasions, that tension may feel very intense and not desirable. Returning to music, the effect that this has is to give music a forward moving feel. Music is directional. Music goes somewhere. It drives towards that rest and closure. And it does this by drawing us, the listeners, in, by pulling us in and pulling us forward. As we listen to music, subconsciously, we want the next sound. We wait for the next sound. So we're drawn into this dynamic of desire, or put another way, a pattern of hopefulness. Music is therefore inherently hopeful. And I'm thinking that much waiting is actually hopeful. And this is where we connect with Advent. An important question is, what are we waiting for during Advent? Well, we're waiting for Christmas, when we look back to the beginning and celebrate Christ's first coming. But Advent is far more than this, as we look forward to an ending and the beginning of the never ending at Christ's second coming. So Advent is when we're particularly conscious of living in hope between the here now and the not yet, between the beginning and the ending, between this present creation and the new creation, which we've begun to experience, but not fully. Christ has come, but Christ will come again. And in the meantime, we live in the penultimate and not the ultimate. In other words, our hope at this stage isn't fully realized. To return to music, music can't be rushed through. You can't just fast forward it. Well, you can, but it doesn't sound very good. Music takes place in time, and music takes time. And to rush it is to weaken it or to ruin it. And again, this is played out in the scriptures. Abraham and Sarah waited. Jacob and Rachel waited. The prophets waited. Zechariah waited. Elizabeth waited. John the Baptist waited. Mary waited. Simeon waited. Anna waited. And waiting continues to be part of the story of God. For much of the time, if ever, God does not seem to be in a hurry. So what do we do? Well, in our own situations, we so often have to wait. And presently we find ourselves in a unique time of waiting, one that we couldn't have imagined. We wait for the R number to come down, for lockdown to be over, for human contact that we so miss, for a return to more familiar ways of living and worship. And what if that is all we can do? We wait. The fact is that God is not at our beck and call. We cannot force God to follow our schedule. We are not in control. But we can keep ready for when God, who is always present to us, does come and break in a fresh way, as God does. And this is exactly what faith comes down to, waiting with readiness and with hope. It's been said that waiting is never a movement from nothing to something. It's always a movement from something to something more. As we enter Advent, may it be one that recognizes the waiting and maybe doesn't fight it or fight it quite so much, and one that's hopeful, not only for Christmas, but that ultimate breaking in when Christ returns, and of those other breakings along the way into our lives and the churches for whom we care.